The Bengals, obviously the draft is now in the past. We'll be focusing on what the schedule is going to look like. We know who the Bengals play, but when they play certain teams matters, and I'm very curious to see what the first 4 games of the season looks like for the Bengals when the schedule reveal comes out later this week. We'll get into that here shortly as well. But the Bengals coming out of the weekend, a lot was made about rookie minicamp getting underway, and it wasn't who showed up. It was, well, technically this guy showed up, but it's who wasn't out on the practice field. Shemar Stewart. Shemar Stewart's
and Demetrius Knight.
So more than
first
one.
and second round pick.
So the first 2 picks of the draft for the Bengals have not participated in practice yet, and that has a lot of people talking. At first, some of the videos that came out, Shemar Stewart, I thought looked. I don't think it looked good on his part initially when the video came out, and he just said, yeah, I just didn't sign it. And I just thought he looked uncomfortable. He looked unprepared to answer that, which I thought was wild. But the more that comes out regarding this situation, it's more of a question mark on the Bengals than it is Shemar Stewart at the end of the day. Shemar Stewart, unfortunately for him, I feel bad that he got put in this position because there's a lot of people doubting whether or not the Bengals made the right pick at number 17 to begin with. So the one opportunity that Shemar Stewart has to right away silence a lot of those doubters is to go look the part on the field. You're not going to prove anyone wrong technically in minicamp or rookie, whatever this is right now. But at least it's a way just to see him out on the field, to see how physically imposing he is, and to kind of quiet down some of the doubt that people have when it comes to whether the Bengals made the right pick at number 17. But now they've put him in a position again where he's not out on the practice field, and some are jumping on him saying, come on, rookie, you're not in position to strong-arm the organization. Get your ass out there and get better and prove that you were worthy of that pick. They've put him in position to look like the bad guy. That's the problem I have, especially when you find out why he's being put in this position. And I'll let Jacob take over from here. But again, just another unnecessarily noisy situation out of Cincinnati that could be easily avoided if the Bengals just stop trying to nickel and dime every tiny situation out there. It does get exhausting after a while.
I think it is important to note that only 11 first-round picks have signed their contract so far, so far from an outlier or anything to be worried about when it comes to Shemar Stewart not being signed. However, I will say most of those guys are participating while unsigned, and Amarius Mims didn't sign his rookie deal last year until July 22nd. He participated throughout the entirety of the offseason camp. The Bengals are the only NFL team out of the 32 teams to have a one-day rookie minicamp. So in my eyes, potentially Shemar Stewart uses that single day of just rookies on the field to make his position known about the contract. And maybe we see him as soon as tomorrow with the open media practice on Tuesday. Hopefully that is the case. But as we continue to find out more and more about why these deals with Stewart, and I assume Demetrius Knight falls under the same umbrella. Most of these reports are just about Shemar Stewart, with him being the first round pick and the biggest name of the defensive additions this offseason. Obviously that's the case. So Mike Florio reported that, per source with knowledge of the situation, the Bengals tried to get Stewart signed, making a push before the one-day minicamp. As we understand it, the talks bogged down regarding the percentage of compensation in future years to be paid as a training camp roster bonus. This roster bonus has become a device for putting a sizable chunk of the player's pay in his pockets for future years earlier in the season. In this case, the numbers offered by the Bengals reflected a lower percentage of the contract than Dallas Turner, last year's 17th overall pick, received from the Minnesota Vikings. So the NFL draft is very set. It's not slots like baseball, but it's pretty damn close. And there's not a lot you can negotiate and change. The Bengals seem to be taking everything they can change and putting them as low as possible. So at some point, I'm not going to blame the kid. I would love to see Shemar Stewart out there. And I do think at some point, even with these negotiations, we should expect him out there. Plenty of unsigned rookies are going through these workouts, but I do think that's a hard thing to ask when we don't necessarily know what the Bengals injury guarantees are, what the Bengals training camp guarantees are. All we know is reports that they don't line up with the rest of the league. Yeah. So I think it's very tough as we learn more about the situation to put much blame on either of these rookies. But also, in another sense, how much time can the Bengals keep doing this, man? How do you keep
Why are they
unnecessary
what's
hurdles?
Do you know what their, even if you disagree with it, do you know what their justification is for going this route of coming up short of what the market is?
Casey,
basically?
Unless I'm missing one in the last few years, I don't remember this happening. I mean, Mims didn't sign till July, but he practiced all summer last summer in rookie minicamp and everything like that. I mean, I would imagine the Bengals didn't drastically change their contract structure this year, unless maybe they did.
If you're only talking about a Bengals example, I can't remember a time where 2 players ever sat out for contract issues and the way that things are hitting the books.
Right.
I can't remember a time, at least, that's ever happened. But I know it's happened before with other teams. I just don't like.
I just mean the sense of the report is that they're holding out because the Bengals contracts are so different from the other 31 teams. And I feel like if that's been the case for a decade, this would have happened before. So I think that's where a lot of my confusion comes in with this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the quotes is that they're doing it for future Bengals rookies to make sure that those
White Knight, Shemar Stewart.
Yeah,
Thanks, buddy.
to make sure that this doesn't happen again to other rookies. And I think there's also like part of the language of like the types of injuries that they can sustain that won't be covered is a big issue too. Like that's just like wording, and it's just Stone Age. It's the same crap that we've talked about this team time and time again being accused of, and they just continue to find more ways of not just like the money pinching thing, but like how you just actually write out the contract, how you actually are allowing these guys to play on these deals without being covered in a sense of just your health, your injury risk. And so it's just really frustrating at this point that we're taking a step forward, 2 steps back.
And the
is
reason,
what it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And I think the reason why I'm even more fully in it's the Bengals' fault camp is because of who's holding out. It's our first and second round pick. It's the only 2 draft picks in that draft class that have any kind of leverage. So that leads me to believe that maybe there is some discrepancies between these contracts. They signed 3 through 6 pretty quickly.
I don't remember there ever being a time where a first and a second on the same team held out
Either.
for the same reasons. I don't remember that ever happening. I think this is just a Bengals thing, and it's only happened maybe like once prior to that, but I couldn't recall.
Yeah.
Again, the fact that we're talking about the wording of contracts and when this money is hitting the bank accounts for these players and how outdated it is and how much money it is, it's really tired. I mean, what are we talking about here? Like maybe a couple months, and we're talking about a couple $100,000 probably.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense, man.
I go right back to not caring at all if he's out there, either today or tomorrow.
Agreed.
Even if he's not unsigned. Plenty of these guys are unsigned, and they're actually practicing.
Joe Burrow needs to be out there, though. But Shemar Stewart...
Unless he has a Met Gala or something. But, yeah, I mean, if Shemar Stewart isn't out there in training camp with the rest of the team and all the coaches because he's negotiating a contract, I'm going to have a problem with him at that point. Because we've seen plenty of first-round picks now that are negotiating their contract while working out, while working with the coaches, while being on the field. And he said, I'm doing everything else except for on the field. Buddy, you had 4.5 sacks. I think you're good off the field.
Yeah.
We're going to need you to do it on the field. Mm-hmm. We drafted you because you look good in a T-shirt and shorts. We're going to need you to play football at some point. So
is any of this because they look at him knowing you're our first-round pick, but you did only have 4.5 sacks in college?
I do think that it comes into play. I think because I think that it's like
you owe us. Like we drafted you.
Like we took a shot.
Yeah,
on
you owe us. That's what I was questioning.
And I don't think that's completely wrong. I think it's probably most likely not the main reason, but I do think there is a point to where every pick the Bengals had, I would say, for not every pick, but a decent amount of picks were considered reaches by a lot. And maybe you look at the stats and you say, what's our justification for giving you the best contract that you deserve right now? I look at your numbers and what you have to be as a Trey Hendrickson replacement. It's hard for you to do that given your 4 career total sacks.
Yeah.
And you look at that contract and you're like, let's see what you got. Let's see what you got first. And then if you're going to dominate, maybe we'll pay you after. The issue with that is we know when that contract is up, they're not going to pay. So I think that's the crux of the issue as to why I don't understand what the Bengals are doing. I don't understand it. If you're not going to pay them for the second part of the contract anyway, then why not make the first part at least like engaging for the first round draft pick that you signed or that you picked? You know what I mean? And all of this has to come into the fact that, like Jacob said too, there's a lot more first round picks that haven't signed. The league is still changing. The way money is handled in the NFL and in college football and with these agents, everything's still moving. It's always in change. So this isn't like a major deal. Like I said, it's May 12th. So this isn't going to be a story going forward. But the fact of the matter is, as the Trey Hendrickson thing continues to go on, and you still have stuff like this happen, it's just all the fingers, they go point right back up to Mike Brown and Duke Tobin and everybody else that runs the Bengals. And it's like, this is why nobody trusts you. I think it's just a story for us more than it's an actual story on the field. But yeah, I think that, sure, does it come into play that some of these guys didn't have the world's greatest college careers? I think so. I think that does come into play.
And if that's the case, then it's like, so you're admitting, Bengals, that you maybe reached. Are you admitting that if that's the case? Because I feel like if this is a third or fourth rounder that's doing this, whatever, I think it's very significant because you mentioned it, Jake. It's the first and the second round pick that's jumping in there, as well. And, if the Eagles, if this was the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't think anyone's even batting an eye at this story. It is what it is because the Eagles have the trust of their fan base and football fans across the league that that you trust their front office. They get it done. The Bengals, to their credit, they technically get it done. They just, as Jake said earlier, they make it way harder than it has to be. What I'm fascinated by is to see who ultimately wins this, if you will. Is he going to get everything that he asked for? If that's the case, if the Bengals are going to give him what he's asking for, why not you should just given it to him from the beginning just to avoid a potential hiccup here. Or do the Bengals finally win one? Maybe the Bengals just feel like they've been beat up. The front office, they're a little, we all love Joe Burrow, right? As Bengals fans, all of us.
Yeah.
We all love Joe Burrow. The front office, I'm sure they love Joe Burrow, but were they loving Joe Burrow at the Super Bowl when he's up? Throwing them under the bus left and right, and that's not what he was doing. He was holding them accountable. So that I don't want that to be misconstrued as me taking a shot. I'm not. My point is, they've had a tough go of it. They've had a very tough go of it as of late. They've lost, and they didn't really want to keep T. Higgins. Most likely, they had to keep T. Higgins. They wanted to pay Jamar Chase. They didn't want to pay him $40, but they had to pay him $40. They're losing a lot of these battles, if you will. And it's self-inflicted wounds on their end because they're not handling these situations right. I will tell you, I don't put Trey Hendrickson in the conversation with these others. They were in the right. They got him a contract offer. He accepted it. He's the one making noise. I don't think the Bengals are making noise with Hendrickson. They're sticking to their guns there. They did make noise, unnecessary noise with Jamar Chase last year. They made unnecessary noise with T. Higgins, and now they're not to the same severity of those others, but they're making noise with this particular situation that I don't think is necessary. Ultimately, who wins this tug of war? Is he going to get exactly what he's asking for, Shemar Stewart?
I bet he gets more guarantees in the next few years.
I think he has the leverage in this specific situation because the Bengals literally can't afford to miss another draft pick, especially in the first round like that. So the defense, they know the Bengals, being they, are aware of the issue. And they have to have good defensive players added in there. If they're not going to do it via free agency, they're going to do it in the draft, and these guys that they draft have to contribute. So I imagine they're going to get close to whatever they want by the time this season starts. But it just goes back to the point where all these distractions, just limit the distractions.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll have a pleasant, stretch up until the season.
It feels like most of the issues we've faced over the last 3-4 years in this Joe Burrow window are incredibly self-inflicted.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not like players getting in trouble off the field.
Right.
It's not like the Browns noise. It's not the recent Ravens noise. It's not guys getting arrested in like the Georgia players, or the Raiders having to deal with their situation. The Bengals have been very, very noisy, but it's not because of bad character guys on the team. It's all front office stuff, and that's what gets annoying at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just about the way that they've done things needs to change. They've not done that at the speed that we wish that they would do it at. They've slowly been changing, but it's just not good enough. The window's closing, and we're dealing with petty contract wording. And it's just I don't know. It gets tired. It gets really tired. I saw that earlier on in the chat here that Craig was saying that it was about the way that they word it from protection from injury. Yes. How do they protect them from injury? Guaranteed money earlier. That's what he's talking about. That's why the 2 and 2 are kind of together in the same hand. It's when they get that money into their account so then that they're protected when they get injured. And what does it cover? doesn't cover enough of the injuries. It's only like career-threatening injuries or something like that, which is just utterly ridiculous. It should be any sort of injury that they're somewhat protected at some rate. But maybe I'm just not. I'm naive to how the NFL works in that regard. But anyways, yeah, Bengals Stone Age. What's new?